today. And joining us right now is undefeated fighter, and she's also ranked in the top 10 in the WBC and the WBA. Junior welterweight Amelia Moore joins us. Hey, Amelia, how you doing, man?
Hey, Billy, it's great to connect. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I was getting nervous. I reached out to you. I'm like, you're still good, right? And I didn't hear back. I was like, oh, geez, But interesting story. Congratulations on your career. One of the things I wanted to ask you about. I know you got a big fight coming up. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But right now, you're ranked in two of the major sanctioning bodies. You have an undefeated record at 2-0 with a knockout. But what I'm more interested in right now is you to tell us what it was like, because you were part of the combat league with the Boston Butchers, where you had a perfect 12-0 record. What's it like fighting on a team of boxing?
Yeah, well, I mean, my transition over to TCL, which was my transition to the pros, came right out of Team USA. And I was a 3 Olympic cycle Team USA athlete for USA Boxing. So the team aspect is always, I mean, I love it. Especially TCL kind of brings that, cultivates that back up. You're not making weight by yourself. You have teammates, you have support system. The athletes are, you just have more around you. And I think that that's what's so different between boxing and MMA is I've noticed that, going to any of the MMA gyms, there seems to be they're big teams. People are coming to these gyms. Whereas boxing, we're so singular, like we may have a large kids program. There's only going to be a couple pros. People are brought in as training partners. But a lot of that time is spent solo dolo. So, I think TCL, like that's been, you leave with brothers and sisters. You go through the trenches with these people, you're traveling around the country, you're fighting back-to-back weeks. It gets gritty, it gets exhausting. And there's super high, super lows. And yeah, I think that it's been such a beautiful opportunity for athletes to make real money. You're looking at, especially in boxing, it's kind of like the economy right now. You've got some people in some low income situations, and then there's money at the top, and there's not much in the middle. So TCL has kind of really brought that up. I've seen athletes that are coming from accepting $500, male fighters in fights who are unsigned, just trying to make it, to making $2,500, $3,000 a week. They're walking away with 12 grand in a month from 3 or 4 fights with TCL. And it's creating worth and self-worth for these athletes that, I'll be honest, kind of weren't given. There was no opportunity to be afforded that prior to this league. So I know there's a lot of boxing purists out there. I kind of beholden myself to that boxing purist category, but I gotta applaud TCL for giving an opportunity to athletes to get opportunities. You saw Raiko Santana was in the prelims, fought Steven Nelson on the Canelo Crawford card. He's a TCL fighter. And then there were also 2 other TCL athletes from the Boston Butchers that fought on I think it was the open workout night for the underdog card. So, there's crazy opportunities that are happening for athletes that may not be afforded those opportunities otherwise, because promotions protect their athletes, and people don't want to take risks on something. And boxing's crazy. Like, I would say that I liken it so much to a race, like having a racehorse. Like, you are taking a high risk on, it's not like a team. You've got NFL, and like one athlete falls out, like that really sucks, but you're going to have somebody else to replace that athlete, and the rest of the team has to step up. Boxing, this is a singular athlete. People are investing in this, and you're really trying to protect their interests. So, which is great for the people who get those opportunities, but man, that can be that sucks for growth. That can suck for other athletes that may be more talented and really should be the ones that should be getting invested into. So yeah, that's kind of my little pitch on TCL. It's been a wild ride for me. I got injured in April, and then they pitched me an opportunity to do broadcast and do ringside commentary, and picked up a new skill this summer and was having a blast with it. Just being able to be that voice. I think a lot of times we as athletes, we just don't get the platform to be able to really voice who we are. Like we get seen in this singular facet of what we are or what we're doing. And we've got athletes out there that we had an athlete that was going through paramedic school, and his wife was pregnant, and you have all of these aspects of athletes who are running jobs. And we had one that was going through, he's a minister, and it was just finished like a counseling program. And there's just so many beautiful things. So I think I really got to dig into not realizing I had a love for it, and being able to share stories, to give a voice to all these athletes that it's an aspect that I knew I myself at times have not been able to really capitalize on. So yeah, it's been cool. It's TCL. Let's go, guys. May the funding continue.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned something, basically camaraderie, well, with the team. How can you transcend that to just a singular? Like, why can't you still have that camaraderie in a gym and still work with teammates, so to speak, even though you're not fighting as a team? Because not all fight. I mean, you got to have sparring. You got to, we were just talking about how the training, in my opinion, has really went downhill over the last 20 years. We have a lot of rah-rah people in the corner right now and not a lot of teachers. How can you take the success, especially your experience with the TCL, and move it over to boxing? And I don't understand why they don't count those fights anyway, but
Yeah. No, I love that question. It's crazy. I got to spend the 5 weeks that Bud Crawford was here in Colorado, and they're always so welcoming to me. He's awesome. And I actually just had a conversation with one of his coaches, Coach Red, about that. And he's like, man, he's like, I know that you attest to this, Amelia. He's like, we have all these, influencer trainers that are getting all of this publicity and hype that's out on the internet, and they're doing BS combinations and flashy pad work, but where's the lessons they're learning? Where are the teachers, the real, the people that are like him? We've got the Alex Rivera's, the Alex Loves, the Ron Sims, the Freddie Roaches, the Bomax, and we've got the Coach Red, like Tudo, all of them, Bernie. It's like we've got these coaches that are really they're teaching the sweet science. There's a rhyme to the reason, and they're looking to build a champions from the ground up and instill knowledge. But to get back to your question, it's funny because he and I just had that conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, trust me, I know, like the real ones who know this sport know, the difference between real teachers, educators, and promoters of the sweet science. And then you see people that are just capitalizing on social media, and good for them. But like, also, I do wish that the true teachers and the people that are holding down the foundation were getting that light also. But they're spending the time in the grit in the gyms, not having somebody following around with a camera. So um,
well, you mentioned before, about the financial gain, and what one of the reasons you liked the TCL, and that's, to me, that's a catch-22 answer, because I agree with you about that. I agree that fighters need to make the most money that they possibly can. I mean, it's obviously an extremely it's a hurt business, right? So, but to make it all about the money is ruining the sport, because you're getting a lot of fighters, and I think it's all tied together, with the guys that don't know how to train. So now they have a fighter, and in my opinion, they're taking advantage of the fighter because they're not preparing him or her to go into the ring and perform the way they should. You got the same token with a manager that may not know the sport, a promoter that doesn't know how to promote, and you've got all these people together, and they have a fighter, and maybe they have some money behind them, so they're tossing some money, so they're getting ranked, or they're getting the right fights, blah blah blah. And what's not happening is the fighter's not progressing, the fighter's not getting better, but the ranking and maybe the paycheck is, but it's hurting the sport, because you have fighters that work their tail off that are in the gym, and I'm sure you've seen them work, and every day they're in the gym, and they're not getting the opportunity because maybe they don't have that financial backing. I mean,
Yeah, I'm one of
that's
them.
the negative.
You're talking to one.
Well, that's the negative side of it, though.
Yeah.
You
Well, I
know,
mean, I'd have to argue back that TCL is the opportunity for those athletes that are talented, that don't have that backing. And that's
yeah,
what I
but
mean.
it's
Like
separate.
Ryko,
In other
yeah.
words, it doesn't. I was earlier in the show, and I don't mean to cut you off, but earlier in the show, we were talking about how I think boxing, the sport of boxing, needs unity. But
Mm,
all we get is division. Everything is division. You know, everybody wants that successful UFC model. Come on, let's be real. That's what it's about, right? I mean, that's where these promoters and even the fighters are guaranteed certain paychecks, and just like you mentioned earlier with the TCL. So how can we make it all work so the sport rises again?
yeah. I don't know. Let's talk through it. I would also argue on the other side, like that with Zuffa, just talking about the UFC model, there is so much pushback. I mean, if you look at there's so many like the commissions themselves. I just saw something put out by the president Solomon from WBC. He was pushing back because in the US it's like we do have the Muhammad Ali Act. We do have these in place that are supposed to be protecting the athletes. In the same token, the UFC model successful. I wish it would go back to what it was before. What I see it as now, and what I don't want that to become in boxing is they have the right to decide who sponsorships are, what percentage is going to what athlete, and deciding worth. And I don't think that that's a progression in sport. I think that's a control in sport. And now you've got athletes who are signed by the promotion and they decide who gets the opportunities. Um, that's crazy. There's no free agency. And so I agree. There is constant division because there's so much money. Everyone's trying to hold on to their bits and pieces. Um, which I think was why it was almost exciting. Like it's exciting kind of what the Riyadh season is doing with invigorating it with lots of money and kind of having fingers in all of the big promotions. Like you saw him getting involved, Turkey Al Sheikh getting involved with uh, Eddie Hearns, attempting to do so with Top Rank and creating these, really big shows. Um, but again, the separateness of them individually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that, but I agree that it's a problem. We need to, again, it's about guarding interest. Um, and again, it's like you can kind of see where Turkey on that side's like, if you don't fight, you're out. If you're not, we're gonna, and I'll tell you, MVP, what I see with Jake, what he's doing, and Nikisa and Mike, what they're doing with the females, they're creating hard fights. They're creating hard fights against their, obviously they're signing people who either have large Instagram followings or have belts. I don't see them really signing anybody else, which is unfortunate because there's other talent too. But they know that that's going to be a draw, but I don't see them giving feeder fights to their athletes. If, they're giving big fights to people who with belts, and we've seen a couple of their signed athletes lose those belts in the last few months. So
And though it doesn't diminish their value.
yes.
And that's been my battle cry. The boxing fan has been brainwashed to feel that the O means
Mm-hmm.
if you lose your O, you
Needs to be
don't have any
protected.
worth anymore, which is wrong. MVP, yeah, okay. He has done well for female boxing. I mean, the Serrano and Katie Taylor fights were fantastic. I mean, I'd watch another one, but and neither one of them regressed at all with their position in the sport, but I just think that, and you mentioned Dana White. That was actually my topic today, and we boxing has a tendency to take the wagons and circle the guy with all the money, right? And
Mm.
it's happened throughout history of the sport. I mean, I wrote a book about a freed slave in the 1800s. It was the same back then, but the truth of the matter is if people go back not that long ago, PBC was supposed to save boxing. They gave us all these fights on TV for free, and everyone, PBC is going to save us, and they didn't, because they wouldn't work with anybody. And Turkey Al-Rashid, he's doing the same thing. He takes over the ring belt. Now you hear Dana White saying he's not going to work with any of the sanctioning bodies, which, the sanctioning bodies are half the problem, in my opinion, because we need unity. You need one. I had come up with this idea several years back where you could actually break boxing as a league into divisions, with each of the four major sanctioning bodies as a division, so they could still maintain their clause in their sanctioning fees. And then ultimately the champions would be the undisputed. I mean, it could work if they're willing to play nice, which they don't. But how can the product of boxing benefit not only the fighters but the fans?
Yeah. And we're looking at even advancing the sport so much. You saw that Alicia Baumgardner relinquished her WBC because, they don't believe. And I know that I saw Right Hook Roxy had was on a podcast and talking about how she went to the women's summit, and the doctors, they had said, that women shouldn't fight 2-minute rounds because of whatever research that they have. I would love to see that. I need to look into that, but it's
I hate
BS
that.
to me.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
mean
BS to
I
me.
hate that. Listen, I worked with Chevelle Halbach for years. We won multiple belts together, and I love her. Okay, I don't like that she's still wanting to fight now, but that's her decision. But she was always a class act, in and out of the ring, and you need more fighters like her. I met and I shouldn't even bring up the name, but that's what I'm about. I tell it like it is, and I hope I don't offend you. But I met Clarissa Shields after she won her first gold medal. I did a women's boxing event in Florida, and she was the sweetest, nicest person. I really thought that she was going to change the complexion of female boxing, because at that time it was still on the rise, and I think it's come a long way. But what
True.
she has become is, in my opinion, is the worst thing for female boxing. I think you have all these the talent in women's boxing right now is at an all-time high, and you can't you what made them so good, what I thought made women's boxing so good, was that women had a tendency to fight the fights the fans wanted. They didn't duck anybody, they didn't run, and now it's like they're starting to follow the men's, and I just hope they don't regress. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, without doubt, I think it was 5 weight classes she's gone up and down. I mean, she's as far as her talent, she's the GOAT,
In her
without
mind,
doubt.
in her
Yeah,
mind.
I mean, even so, like her last title defense against Danielle Perkins. I mean, that was a hell of a show. That was a big ask, and it's like we liken it. I would liken it to Crawford stepping up to Canelo with that weight difference. It's height and weight difference was crazy with Danielle and Clarissa, but it disheartens me a little bit. Not disheartens me. It pains me to see that we're not all kind of coming together in sport as females to demanding parity. And again, like, just to go back to, the WBC's stance, like, it's unfortunate. It is, because yet they're still saying that, well, you're only fighting 2-minute rounds. Well, now you're trying to say that science is the reason that we're not worth the money we're worth, because women, man, we're here. And you ask anybody, they're like, oh, well, women don't draw crowds. That's not true. Like, we fight like the opportunity is going to be taken away because it could at any moment, and
Listen,
the veracity is amazing.
again, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I had
No, please.
last week we had Harvey Dock on the show, and he specifically said, because I asked him about what it was like, refereeing the Serrano and Katie Taylor fight, and he said it was an all women's card. It was the greatest thing. He said it was sold out. They sell, they sell, they sell. So I mean,
Ooh,
he said it on the show.
love it.
So what you're saying is 100% true. That the WBC the WBC doesn't want to lose their clause. They're just like every other sanctioning body. They only look at their sanctioning body as the sanctioning body, and nobody else exists. There lies the problem, and unfortunately, they're not going to go away because it's a moneymaker for them. All these belts, these eliminators, that's all sanctioning fees. How do you think they
Mm,
make their money? People don't understand it, and the worst part is when you have all these belts, you dilute the value of having a belt. There seems to be more fighters with belts than fighters without.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm in one of those. I very much so see any interaction like how can I create value in the space that I'm walking into? Not and, some people see it the other way, like what do they have to offer me? I don't. I know that if I can create value, value will end up being reciprocated. And I think the hard thing for me is to go and again, seeing the WBC stance. And if they're truly in it for money, if you're making the opportunity to create more money where we're extending these rounds to 3 minutes potentially, right? The value is going to increase. There's more money to tap into. So I just, I think it's a missed opportunity, like, as a business wise, period. And it's what I see it as is, there's more, especially like historically. I know Alicia is fighting the 12 3 minute rounds. Um, there's huge endorsement, when you make history, look at Crawford, people getting behind him. When you're looking to test the scales and really push fate, push history, and really tip the scales in the favor of something that's never people don't have the vision for, there's a lot of people who want to get behind that. So because if it's pulled off, how many people want to be like say that they were on the right side of that potential? So
No, hey, listen, I, I loved what Terrence Crawford did. It wasn't about the money. I mean, obviously, he made a good chunk of change, but he didn't do it for the money. And I said, I said it on the last show. I hope that by him challenging himself and doing something that other people told him he couldn't do, except for me. I said that he would win the fight 2 years ago when he started calling Canelo out. I just knew that he would, but um, I hope he inspires other fighters to do the same thing, to challenge themselves and understand that there's not a loser in that fight. Canelo's career is not over because he lost, and Crawford's fight career wouldn't have been over either if he lost. People would have just said, "Yeah, I told you so. You shouldn't have moved up that much." So I mean, there are calculated risks that you could take in the sport of boxing. So speaking of which, so your plan now, you're going to focus on just your career. There's no more team boxing for you.
So right now I'm talking to them. I am just focusing on my career primarily, looking at a fast track towards a world title. Big things happening next year in 2026, but they've asked me to come back as doing broadcast. I am super stoked for that. There's an opportunity to still stay involved with the league, help them grow, help the athletes grow, and help me grow. I mean, gosh, what a crazy resume builder. I got to work with Ray Flores and Claudia, and Beto Duran, like some of the best, and even, the directors on who are handling the broadcast they've been involved in the biggest projects in, broadcast history. So if you looked at their resumes, I've had really, really great mentors. So not looking to fight next year, but looking to come back on as a ringside commentator. And I'm totally fine with that. I love that. And being able to also just really focus in on what I'm doing, and moving through the ranks and going after big fights. So I mean that's been kind of my thing. I even my pro debut, I was not interested in doing a 4 rounder. I wanted to jump right into 6, and they were like easy, and I'm like, listen, I skydive, I ride motorcycles, I snowboard, like I know what I'm capable of, and I also know how seasoned I am, and I don't think it was necessary, but just a little bit of a safeguard. They asked me to do two, and I was like, okay, fine. But yeah, I mean, even for me, I wanted my pro debut to be a six rounder, and I wanted it to be against seasoned ranked athletes, and the last two have been. So, um, again, like looking for the big fights, looking for, and I don't want to say big, like, yes, looking for big fights because it's supposed to be building towards something, but looking for progressive fights, every single one of them. I hate the narrative when we, just like you said, looking back where these athletes are being protected. No, I train every single fight. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't every sparring session, one, like I'm the underdog, like I'm B side. It doesn't matter if I'm with a promotion or not. I train like I'm B side. I train like anything could happen, and I train to overestimate my opponents, because that's how you grow. You go to sparring sessions, you seek out athletes that are as good as you, if not better, and you seek out the people in the spaces that are going to push your growth, because otherwise, what the F are we doing here? It's just like, if you're not here to try to like expand and be the best, then like please go home, because there's resources that you're tying up for other athletes that want to be the best.
Exactly. And the thing is, I've never blamed the fighters, except for one, but I've never blamed the fighters, so to speak, because it's not them. Like you just said, you explained it perfectly. You work your ass off. You're trained for the fight. You're trying your best. You're not taking your opponent lightly. You want to go in there. You want to perform. You want to pay
Yeah.
yourself back for all the sweat and work you put in. And you get some slug in there that had no business being in the same ring, and it's demoralizing to the fighter that has worked hard, and I don't think it helps the fighters, and it doesn't.
No,
It's
I'll
certainly
turn those fights down though. Like if I think that and that's, I don't, it's not to be disrespect. I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm so much better. No, if I there's a especially in the women's divisions, there's a gap, man. Like there's a talent gap. And when you've had 100 amateur fights and I've fought all over the world, I don't want to go in there and look great against a small fish in a small pond. I want to look like a great fighter against another person who holds respect within the space.
well. You don't get. Look, I've said this for years. You don't get better by fighting lesser opposition. The only way you're going to get better is if you up your level of opposition with every fight, so that when
Mhm.
you get your title shot, you're going to hold on to that title for a long time. I'll never. I always use it as an example, but I'll never forget. A fighter. I don't even want to mention his name, but he wins a world title, right? And then he loses, and then his Lou DeBell, his promoters on the show telling me, well, he's still learning. Wait a minute, what do you mean he's still learning? He just won a world title. You can't say that you're learning after you win a world title. You're supposed to learn and then prepare yourself for a world title, then keep the title for a while. That's my thoughts. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, my progression in sport has been to be undeniable. And I think that that's every single day. And, amateur boxing is super tough, right? There's a lot of politics. You can fight a host country in their country, and there's a lot of robberies, but, um, becoming undeniable where your skill set, you're pushing every day to have so many tools in the toolbox that you have an answer for every question that's being presented. And I agree. Like are we looking at, and I find that if you look at some of the pro careers, people jump towards the money. And it kind of brings back to what you said a little bit a few minutes ago about the money kind of spoiling things, and we look at these opportunities where people kind of jump towards these big paydays they're not ready for, and then they're like, oh well, we weren't ready, like we got it, but we couldn't hold on to it because we weren't built properly. We were built sloppily by having too easy opponents, not being having progressive fights, and then jumping at opportunities that you weren't ready for. And I hate hearing how there was a teammate of mine, and there was an opportunity for a world title opportunity, and they were like, oh well, you may not get that again. Well, that's BS. Let it go now, because the goal is to be undeniable. It's not to have a shot. Like, F your shot. when I'm ready, this is going to be everything. And that's what I told her. I was just like, dude, let that go. Like,
It's called cash out, and that's what the
yeah.
teams do now. They coddle the fighter. They get them all the wins. They get them in that title shot. There's the payday. So you figure, okay, and the management says, okay, this is the fight. We're going to get all our money back. We're going to make a few bucks, and if my
Mhm.
fighter wins, I'm going to get another win. If not, it's over. And that's the unfortunate part, because the fighter themselves, they're not looking at it that way, most of them anyway. But speaking of fights, unfortunately, I'm not going to be ringside for your next fight. I'm going to be at the following one, but October 11th, Foxwoods, you're going to be on that card. Tell us about your opponent.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am fighting a 17 fight veteran MMA fighter who's had 5 appearances in the UFC. Has had one boxing event. I wish that she had had a little bit more boxing experience, but she has a pretty good stand-up game, switch fighter, which is really exciting for me because I also been training really hard to also become switch and be able to fight southpaw too. It's so much fun. And at this point, it's like, if your footwork's good enough, it you kind of do it anyway. It's just this natural progression to be able to use your hand, you be able to punch off of any foot and any step. So, yeah, I mean, we know MMA fighters are really tough, really they're tough, can come forward, they switch, they're super unorthodox, right? So,
They
fighting
can
down
take a
to one,
punch. They can take
but
a punch.
they can take a punch. They got hell of a chin, right? They're
Yeah.
real tough.
Yeah.
And I'm excited, it's gonna be a scrappy fight, 6 rounder. I coming down to 135 for it, for this fight and just kind of floating between. I knew I wanted to eventually come down to 135. I didn't think right now it's like we've had movement at 140. And it's easy. Like I very easily make 140. A little bit extra work to make 135, but it's not crazy. I mean, I fought 125, 57 kilo for Team USA for 2 years. So, I mean, I floated from 125 all the way up to 147. So anything's possible if you do it right. But so yeah, that's what we're looking at is my first 6 rounder, and I think it's gonna be a fun night. I don't know. I'm ready. I feel like I'm so over ready at this point. Had an amazing camp with Bud, and jumped right into the last 3 weeks here where I got to work with Nili Block, who she's a Israeli fighter, 7-time world champion kickboxer, southpaw. Man, what a firecracker. I mean, she is a hell of an athlete. She's getting ready to make her pro debut here in November. So, she happened to be in Denver, and I really love how the stars kind of aligned, to get me back into the ring full steam, full board, for October 11th.
Well, I'm real sorry I'm not going to be there because I would have liked to have met you in person. Quick question.
Eventually,
Oh yeah,
you
no, no,
will be. I
no.
know you
Our
will be.
paths are going to cross. I know that. But not looking ahead. I don't really want you to look past your fight on the 11th. But do you have plans to fight again this year, or are you focusing on 26?
Yeah. So to be determined. Would love to fight in December. If that works out the way it does. The full goal this year was to fight 4 or 5 times and have like a massive year. And it's like every time you make plans, the universe is just kind of like puts you back in check. So hoping that we'll see if it ends up working out December. If a card comes up, if CES Boxing has something that pops up beginning mid-December before the holiday season. If not, end of January, beginning of February. So we will see. We'll see what happens. I'll be ready if it is, and if it's not until the late winter, January, February, then we'll still be ready. So just kind of like setting up dates and trying to have a big year for 26 also.
Well, Jimmy is an old school promoter. Not many left like him, so you're in good hands. Trust me there. We got a lot of people in the chat room speaking highly of you. They can't wait to see you fight, and I appreciate you joining us. And I hope we can get you back after you win. maybe we'll plan on getting you back, and you can tell
Love
us
that.
about
Let's
it.
go. And
Uh,
thanks everybody that's tuning in, that's in the chat room. That's fantastic. I can't see it from my end, but I appreciate your guys' support. And yeah, I'm just gonna send out, like, if I'll have all my stuff posted on my webpage, ameliamoreboxing.com. So the live stream link will go live. I'm working on getting that. I guess it's being live streamed through TMT, the money team, because of Hagler. So Mayweather, I had no idea he had a streaming agency and also an app, but they're going to be doing exclusively through TMT. And I'll throw that up on my website and my socials so that, anybody that can't be there in person can still tap in and get to just immerse in the excitement.
Sounds good, and I'll be over the next day or so. I'll cut out your spot here, and I'll send you the link. All right.
You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Billy.
I
It's
I
wealth of knowledge coming out of you, man. Love
listen.
this.
I appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to have you back. So have a good night. Good luck on the 11th, and I can't wait to see you the next time. Hey, I know they're fighting. I know it's a little soon, but I am going to be at their November 1st show. So hey, if you want to fight back to back, but in any event, all right,
Talk to
Amelia.
Jimmy Sr., see if he can grab me another opponent. We'll just jump on for funsies.
Hey, listen, I'm still gonna collect the dinner from him from something that we did a while ago. So maybe I'll bring it up. But in any event, thanks for coming on. I look forward to the next time.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.